up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I am honored to bring back Mike Volpe, international whistleblower and investigative journalist. Mike's work spans from covering topics such as politics, immigration, and everything in between, but perhaps his greatest and most memorable work is what he's doing to expose the corrupt secret family court and the child trafficking taking place globally through these court and CPS systems. Mike's work covering the most explosive stories in the world has been recognized globally, and he continues to be on the forefront of the movement to protect our children. What I love most about Mike is his deep passion for what he does and his resilience to withstand all the obstacles put in his way, no matter the cost. He gives a voice to the voiceless and hopes to parents and children all over the world. And one of the most important things he's done is to allow innocent parents who lost rights to their children to know they aren't alone in this fight and that there are people like him who care enough to do something about it. Mike has a blog and a podcast on Substack that I highly suggest subscribing to learn more about the topics we'll be covering today and more. And he also works with investigative journalist Megan Fox on her podcast as well on YouTube and other platforms. Mike is a hero in my eyes and in the eyes of many, and one day I know his work will be regarded as some of the most important of our time with what he's had the courage to cover and uncover in a day and time when 99.9% of other journalists shy away from the hard topics he covers, such as child trafficking. I'm honored to welcome back again today, the one, the only Mike Volpe. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I've actually had a lot of requests to have you back on, so I'm really happy that we could work this out, and I could talk to you for 24 hours straight and still have information to extract from you. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here. Now, before we get started, I know you've been doing some incredible work these past couple months since I've had you on. Question that I wanted to ask you before we lead into some of those stories is, how do you choose the stories that you decide to cover?
Actually, if I can figure out how to make money on them is generally how I choose it. And I do have on the Substack, michaelvolpe.substack.com, there's a founders member. If you pay for that, I'll take a look at your story. And you have to have something completely ridiculous for me not to do it if you pick that up. But really, generally, they're very hard to finance and make money on. And that's how I generally choose them. When I was working primarily freelance, it was if I could find a place for them. And then now that I work on my own, if I do fundraisers, do several different ways, but that's generally how I choose them.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. This is something, it's very hard if you're not working for a major, corporation or mainstream media. It's very hard to have the ability to make a living doing this type of work. It's like my own podcast, I fund from my own pocket, and it's very difficult. Like I wish that there were ways to, and I pray that one day I'll too be able to, monetize off what I'm doing so I can do it more. So I love that about you. Now talk to us about some of the stuff that you've been working on, because you've had some bombshell cases these last couple of months. And even before that, I know that there's stuff we didn't get to cover last time. So I'll just let you kind of take it away and you can talk about some of your findings lately.
Okay, so yeah, when we talked last time, I was doing a lot of stuff in Orange County, California, and I still am. And I don't remember, I think actually I hadn't discovered, and I think this is the first thing that I sent you. So if you want to get it up on the screen, I discovered, it's actually, I call it a how-to manual, but it was actually initially a webinar that a few people, inside the Orange County Family Court System created for the Family Law Division of the Orange County Bar. And the webinar doesn't, on first glance, look all that explosive or corrupt, but I called it a how-to manual to commit. What the webinar does goes through, I think there were like 6 court professionals, as I call them, and says, here's the best time to pick this one. Here's the best time to pick this one. And so it doesn't sound bad, but in reality, that's what the court does, is the court identifies a problem and then says, let's bring in this court professional for this problem. It identifies a second problem, says, let's bring in this court professional. And that's how the racketeering works. So the racketeering works the same way all around the country and really in the world. The manual, and there you go. So here, minors counsel, which I think is the equivalent of a guardian ad litem in other places. And you can see on the right, it says when cost is an issue. So they're suggesting the minors counsel is cheaper than other court professionals, but when cost is an issue, maybe not appoint anyone so that no one has to pay for anything. And another one, when time is critical. So I talked to several people who had a minors counsel in Orange County, and none of them said, boy, I was really glad at a minors counsel because we had a time sensitive issue and they were able to resolve it. So basically they're just coming up with bogus reasons to appoint a minors counsel. And there was like 6 of these court professionals.
Wow.
And so it's basically like a how-to guide for people working in the court. Whenever they identify a problem, they're like, oh, we need to appoint this person. This problem, we need to appoint this person. And that's how you have a guardian ad litem, a minors counsel, parenting coordinator, all these other things, all on one case, all charging $200 to $400 an hour. Now, the attitude is the same everywhere. This manual, this webinar is unique. It's unique that someone would put together something in writing that tells the court exactly when to approve appointments. And it also speaks to the attitude that these courts have. And the attitude is we want to identify problems and then we want to appoint people to solve the problem. And of course, they never actually solve the problem.
Yeah.
After the minors counsel is appointed, more times than not, what they do is after they look at the case and they say, boy, what this case needs is, say, a custody evaluator or a psychological evaluator. And they come up with a second person that they want to appoint. And then after that evaluator gets through with it, they say, boy, this family needs a therapist. And now you've got a third person. And that's how they get multiple people onto the case. And if you can get the second slide up, I have examples of how they, during cases, this is exactly what they do. And so I don't remember which one the second one was. So let me take a look at it. But you'll see throughout a judge or another court professional will be saying something about the case, and then they'll say something like, and this is why we need. And so right here, I believe the court scheduled an order to have minors counsel have an opportunity to be appointed and meet with the clients. This is the first issue that I'd like to address. And then after the minors counsel is released, I think they wanted to get a second. Yeah, then look, this case is very deep and broad and lengthy, and there are a lot of issues that have happened consistently in this case that need to be assessed by a 730 evaluator. That's a California case. 730 is just their term for a custody evaluation. So you can see it. Well, we have a minors counsel. This case is very complicated, and that's why we need an evaluation. And then by the time the evaluator comes down, after their evaluation is done, they're probably going to say, we need a therapist. And that's how the racketeering works. They're not there to solve your problems. They're there to create the environment to get another person in, and then a third and a fourth and a fifth. And by the way, this works really similarly in probate, which is basically the same thing, except for old people. You put old people into the system as opposed to young people. And it's the same way. And I just interviewed a woman from Orange County. And one thing she said is they often play different roles. So they're like a guardian ad litem in one case, they're a guardian in another case, they're a fiduciary, and they have like similar terms in probate. And the reason they have different roles is they all want to refer to each other. So maybe you got appointed as a guardian ad litem, but you're my friend, Emma. So, you hooked me up like 5 times, got me on cases, but you were the guardian ad litem on those cases. I'm already the guardian ad litem. So I'll just have you recommended it for whatever role, because they're all really the same. They claim they're not, but they are. And so that's why these people will have different roles, because it depends on who gets appointed, because they all want to refer each other, but who got the first appointment? And then you bring the other people in. It doesn't matter. The key for them is to get on the case, stay on the case for as long as possible, and charge hundreds of dollars an hour and maximize billing. And that really is racketeering, because the intent is not to fix anything. The intent is to rack up billing. And if you have to commit perjury, obstruction of justice, and any other crime to do it, you will do it. And can you get I think I had 4. Can you get the third one up?
Yes. I will get that right now. The thing that's so mind-blowing that I know is why people have such a hard time accepting this is the fact that people are profiting off of these children, and that is
So
really,
yeah, look, they don't care about your kids. They care about their greed. The main issue is that this is all allowed, that a judge is allowed to take a case like this and say, I can appoint one person, I can appoint two people, I can appoint 10 people. This is a great one. This is out of Connecticut. So, and it's when she says her ex-husband, it was actually his attorney. So she is referring to a woman named Heidi Holmes. So let me read it, because this is another perfect example of how it works. As she explained, her ex-husband accused her of parental alienation, and in conjunction, his attorney pushed for a guardian ad litem. The guardian ad litem's name is Mary Bergamini, and I'll give a few tidbits about her. So you see, the lawyer accuses her of parental alienation, and the lawyer immediately says, that's why we need a guardian ad litem. And then what happens? That guardian ad litem would later recommend the appointment of a therapist, Dr. Shannon Schrager. So the lawyer gets the guardian ad litem in, the guardian ad litem gets Dr. Janice Schrager in. But here's the best part. And so this, of course, is how the system feeds on itself, identifies problems, and then uses those problems to justify the appointment of numerous court professionals. Dr. Schrager charged $250 per hour. Bergamini charged $125 an hour. And then here's the best part. Heidi told me that Bergamini would attend the sessions that she and her daughter had with Dr. Schrager. So she would be in the sessions and charging $125 an hour. So they just figure out ways to make as much money as possible. Nobody is fixing anything. So this lady, Bergamini, she was involved in a case in 2014. It was Eric Stevens and his ex-wife. His ex-wife, I don't know if she was ever convicted, but his ex-wife was charged, and she was charged because she was on tape calling who she thought was a hitman to try to have her ex-husband killed. And Bergamini and the rest of the court process, so she's charged criminally with a very serious crime, they didn't stop this woman from having custody with her child. And Bergamini was involved in that case. One other thing, Connecticut is one of the most notorious states. And there's a book called Worst Interest of the Child by Keith Harmon Snow. I'm in it, but I don't get any money if you buy it. So I'm not saying it for financial benefit, but he wrote that book in 2015. This article was written in 2014. This is right after the state legislature held like 2 weeks worth of hearings where people came in who had been victimized and talked about their cases. And that's one of the reasons why they covered this, because this article was written maybe a month or two after that happened. So the corruption goes back well over a decade, and it still basically goes on uninterrupted, even though we've got more than a decade worth of cases, well more than a decade. And in Keith's book, he identified over 70 cases, and those are now over a decade old. So one of the ones that I covered is now like the notorious case of today is Kathy, I hope I got it right, Riordan and her ex-husband, Chris Ambrose. One reason why that's a notorious case is that's been covered by a guy named Frank Parlato. It's also been covered by Wayne Dolcefino. So Frank broke, I can't ever pronounce it, but NXIVM. You can look it up. Very big human trafficking case. Huge case. The Allison Mack, who used to be on that Superman show, she was a part of it. He broke it. So he's no small chump. He's a kind of a big deal.
The Nexium cult too, wasn't she? Allison Mack?
Right. Well, that's Nexium. I can't ever pronounce it, but Frank broke that story. Frank broke it. In fact, he interviewed the head from jail, even though he broke the story. So he's no small timer. Wayne Dolcefino is the owner of 30 local Emmys in Texas. He did a story on this, Karen Riordan. I hope I got her last name right. Also, Chris Ambrose wrote for a lot of famous TV shows like Law and Order and other ones. So basically, Ambrose was essentially living almost full-time in California while Karen was taking care of their 3 adopted kids. And then he got caught plagiarizing one of the TV shows that he wrote, was exactly like another TV show, loses his job, comes back to Connecticut, and then suddenly accuses Karen of what? Parental alienation, just like Heidi, because that's the weapon of choice, as Frank told me, the misuse of the weaponization, if you will, of parental alienation. And then what happens? Guardian ad litem comes in. Like, her name is Hurwitz. What does she do? She recommends the appointment of some sort of a therapist. Her name is Caverly, and before you knew it, 3 or 4 people are on the case, and they're all saying that the problem is Karen, and then they moved the kids from Karen to Chris, and of course, Chris had made all the money. He was able to control all the money, and in Connecticut, one party is allowed to pay for all of this. So Chris is the one paying for the guardian ad litem for Caverly and everyone else appointed on the case. And yet they are taking their recommendations as if they're objective, even though one of the 2 parties is paying. So not only has the case dragged out and all of these people have made money, but the kids are stuck with Chris Ambrose, who is definitely an abuser, possibly a sexual abuser. Look at Wayne's video. The kids actually reached out to him with accusations of sexual abuse. And then on top of it, Karen got an aggressive lawyer named Nicole Acuna. Now, she made very inflammatory comments that suggested that there was a cabal of Jews, and I'm Jewish. Shouldn't have said it, but immediately as soon as she said it, the judge latched onto it. I think the judge, I can't pronounce the judge's name, and disbarred her.
Oh, man.
So she can no longer even practice law. The offense she made was so small compared to the punishment. And she's being represented by a guy named Norm Pattis, who is a famous, notorious, well-known lawyer. He's represented a lot of people, including the guy killed himself. The guy who killed his ex-wife, Doulos is his name, but he's represented a lot of different people. And I'm, oh my God, I'm going to forget the guy's name. The guy who's being sued by the parents who had kids killed in Sandy Hook because he called it a false flag. So Pattis is, he represents a lot of different people. And keep in mind, you should never look at the lawyer and say, you represent bad people, especially a criminal lawyer. You represent the people who pay you. That's not a reflection on you.
Right.
You know, the best lawyers are mob lawyers. That doesn't make them mobsters. But so he's representing her, trying to get her license back. But this is how deep the corruption goes, is that that she gets a lawyer who aggressively represents her interests. So what do? They just disbar the lawyer. But the system works the same way. Chris comes in, argues parental alienation. They bring in Hurwitz to be the guardian ad litem. Hurwitz, if I'm not mistaken, has charged nearly $200,000 for that case, right? I don't know how much Caverly's made, but it's a pretty penny. I don't remember how many other people are on there, but why do they do this? Well, Hurwitz probably does it for the $200,000. Caverly does it for hers. Now, Caverly, she's now and I should mention one other thing. The judge, for the most part, I think the judge is still on the case. His name is Gerald Edelman. His corruption goes so far back that he was mentioned a lot, more than once, in Keith's book, which is now 7 years old. And in fact, Keith pointed out that Edelman and others were guardian ad litem, and that in Connecticut, and it's not just Connecticut, you become a guardian ad litem. It's like a farm system. Like, you're in AAA, you want to be a judge, you be a corrupt guardian ad litem first, do a little corrupt work there, boom. Probably the most notorious guardian ad litem who became a judge is a woman named Maureen Murphy, and she was involved in Sonny Kelly's case. And I interviewed Sonny, that's behind my paywall, but she was the primary focus of Keith's book. And there's a really notorious scene where Sonny's son was being molested by his father. And they had a guy, I don't remember, but he was very well-respected, well-known doctor who was in graphic detail describing what the son was telling him. And as he's doing it, the way Sonny described it, Murphy, who was there with her girlfriend, or maybe wife, I don't remember what the relationship was, but you understand, they're lesbians, basically started playing out the scene from When Harry Met Sally in the restaurant. She was basically acting like she was having an orgasm as this guy is describing this kid being molested. And then she went on to be a judge. And she's eventually been removed and is now, like, done being powerful, but that actually rarely happens. Usually you become a corrupt guardian ad litem and then you become a corrupt judge. The other place is in the House Judiciary Committee, the State House Judiciary Committee, the one that picks the judges. So you want to be a judge, first you run for the State House, you get on the Judiciary Committee, and you're the one, they get nominated and then they go through your committee. So you're the one deciding if another judge should be, and then you want to be a judge. Of course, there's no conflict of interest there. So essentially in Connecticut, they've created a system with multiple conflicts of interest, very corrupt. But as I said, the playbook is the same. This thing that I found in Orange County is very critical because they've put it basically on paper or electronically, however you want, what their goal is. You can see what their goal is. They want to identify problems and say, here's who we want to appoint. And then that person gets appointed and they want to appoint a second person. And the second person gets appointed and they say, we need to appoint a third person, a fourth person. Sunny Kelly's, as I said, the most notorious. I think she had over 10 people who were appointed. She spent over $1 million. People always say, why do they do this? Well, they make, between $1 million, that's a lot of people making a lot of money. That's why they do it.
Right.
It's all greed. I think I gave you a fourth one. A fourth.
We really had three. If there was,
okay, no,
or if there's somewhere I can bring it up, I'm happy to go look while you're chatting.
Okay, if we have a fourth one, get that up. But I think that gives people a sense of how this works. And so when people are wondering, when you hear about a case and you're wondering, why would you give a child to a bad parent? One question they should ask was, how many people were appointed to the case? I bet it's a lot. I bet it's more than one. And so that's one of the reasons why it happens, because you have all of these people appointed to the case. They are able to make money. See, here, the thing is, by doing this, you have what I call a perpetual case. Like that Ambrose versus Riordan, that'll never end. The kids will be unhappy. You'll bring in a bunch of court experts to try to fix the problem. The problem will never get fixed. And at some point, one of these court experts will say, you know what, I've milked this as much as I can. You know what, this isn't working. I'm a blah, blah, blah therapist. What you really need is another kind of therapist. And then you bring in another kind of therapist and they work on the case for a year or two. And they say, what you really need is somebody else and somebody else. And again, this is behind the paywall, but there's another case and it's downstate Illinois. And the girl is being forced to live with her father. Her father is sexually inappropriate and she's afraid of him. And you can hear the girl talking to one of the therapists and the therapists are like, well, we need to bring in this other therapist so you can learn to cope. So see, it's so perfect. You put kids with abusive people and then you bring in therapists so they can learn to cope. Rather than getting them away from the abusive person, then they don't even have to have a therapist. But see, without being in the presence of the abusive person, you don't need the therapist. Mm-hmm. And so it really makes sense. The system that in that way, it's like a well-oiled machine. And it's really designed to bring in experts, bring in appointees who then bring in other appointees and they maximize billing. And that's one of the reasons why in many of these cases, one or the other party starts with a lot of money, because then you can milk the money. And as I said, this is definitely national, to some degree global, this dynamic of getting people appointed, having them make a lot of money, bringing in their friends. And as a result, you are trafficking kids because you're moving them from the fit parent to the unfit parent, and you're doing it to maximize the profit of the lawyers as well. Chris Ambrose lawyer is Nancy Aldrich. I can only imagine. I don't know if I've seen her billing, but I doubt it's small. I bet Nancy Aldrich made a whole bunch of money. So, and the lawyers make out well as well. And also one other thing people should know, and this happened in St. Louis. Sometimes you're the divorce lawyer, the notorious one, Elaine Podlowski. In many cases, she was a divorce lawyer. In other cases, she's the guardian ad litem. So a lot of people, they believe that that the lawyers are actually colluding together. Well, I can believe that too. Why? Well, because on this case, you're on opposite sides. But on another case, maybe that lawyer might want to appoint you as a guardian ad litem. So you're really going to fight hard? Because then maybe you're going to lose your referral source. You don't want to lose your referral source. You'd rather be friends with the lawyer who can appoint you to a lot of other cases, and vice versa. And so the fact that they can wear multiple hats creates all kinds of conflicts of interest. The fact that a judge has the power to appoint multiple people to a case creates all kinds of conflicts of interest. The fact that a perpetual case makes people more money than a case that's wrapped up creates all kinds of conflicts of interest. Because all of these are the reasons why kids are moved from the fit parent to the unfit parent. Because if they're with the fit parent, there's a lot less money to be made. And so that's basically how the racketeering works.
Oh my gosh. And I know, like, I talked to, you've worked with some of the mothers that I talked to, but there's a lot of them, you know, and even down to the visitation rights. The mothers or fathers that do get minimal visitation rights have to pay like $200 an hour to have a
I'm glad you
visit.
pointed that out, because I forgot about that. So another part of the scam is to put as many generally fit parents into supervised visitation. So when I did in Miami-Dade, they had a notorious one, the supervised visitation place, Family Crossroads Services Incorporated. So they would constantly be fed parents to be supervised. And the fact that this is an industry, supervised visits, how many parents realistically need supervised visits? You'd think it's kind of small, that are designed strictly for supervised visits. And the other thing that's really important about supervised visits is, you always try to do what's in the best interest of your client in a business. But supervised visits, their client is the court. So you do what's in the best, not the parents, because the parents aren't there by choice. See, you know, an area may have like 2 or 3 supervised visitation places to choose from. The parent has no choice. So who does the court choose? So who are you trying to please? The judge, the lawyers. It's not the parents. So if all of these other places are trying to create a perpetual custody case, then it behooves you as the supervised visitation place to make recommendations that make it look as though the parent's not quite ready for unsupervised visits, because then you go away. You're no longer needed. So yes, you're right. That's another part of the scam, is all of these supervised visitation.
And the amount of money, $200 an hour to see your child.
Right.
I could afford that consistently. Even somebody, you know, and it's like these parents are already paying so much money in court and to lawyers and for everything else and child support. And now they have to pay.
How is that in the best interest of the child to take all that money from the parent? I talked to a place in North Carolina, Pharaoh's Parenting, I think it's called. Well, I talked to their head person. Theirs was a lot cheaper. It was like $65 an hour, but it was cash, exact change. So that's the other thing, because they don't need to cater to you, the parent. They don't care about you. They need business. The business comes from the court. It doesn't come from you. It's not like you as a parent recommend other parents who need a supervised visit. That's not how it works. So the parent gets treated like dirt. The judge is treated with respect because the judge is the one feeding the business. But yeah, you're right. That's another part of the scam. And it's absolutely amazing how many parents are forced into supervised visits, which is not only devastating, totally embarrassing, and it's very uncomfortable for the children because you have people watching over you as you interact with your parent or with your child, and it's completely ridiculous. So that's another part of the scam, and of course that's where like the first, the second, the third court appointee, at some point, one of them says, this parent's not quite ready to see their kids on their own. We probably want to start with supervised visitation. And look, I want to say one other thing, even in the best of circumstances, with people who are not trying to corrupt who are being objective and giving their honest opinion, nobody really knows anything. So even if somebody's not trying to corrupt, who you really think there's somebody who's an expert in somebody else being a good parent? No. So all of these people, even if you're trying to do it right and you're not trying to corrupt and you're doing it by the rules, in the end, it's all guesswork anyway. You don't know who the better parent is. Like these custody evaluations, you talk to each parent for say 4 to 5 hours. Then you interview their friends. You maybe interview the kids, a teacher or two. You really, you think you know. You think you figured out who's the right parent by looking at them for a couple hours, talking to them for a couple hours? No. As a friend of mine said, nobody really knows what's happening behind closed doors besides the people living in that house. And trying to get that stuff, and the Riordan, that custody trial was like 30 days, which is ridiculously long. But even 30 days, you really think, even if everybody's trying to be on, why do you think it's 30 days? So you can maximize the billing. But even 30 days, you think you've really got a good handle on who the better parent is? No, even if everyone is trying to do the right thing, the system is not designed to do the right thing. This isn't a murder case where in an hour you can prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. With a good parent, there's no proof. No one besides the family knows. And that's why, in my opinion, all these decisions should just be left to the family and just let them fight it out. And nobody should get involved. And if you've got a toxic family, nobody's going to fix a toxic family. So it doesn't really matter. But even in the best of circumstances, I don't think that anybody actually figures out who's the fitter parent. The other thing is, again, even if you're not trying to corrupt, you may have a favored parenting style. You may have a favored this. And if the parent is different, if you're a disciplinarian and the parent isn't, you're going to favor the disciplinarian parent, but that's your own personal view. That doesn't mean it's right. And so somebody who's a disciplinarian is going to constantly pick the disciplinarian parent. And that doesn't mean the disciplinarian parent is correct. So the whole system is jacked up, even in the best of circumstances. But let's face it, most of the time, it's not the best of circumstances anyway. So and I wanted to mention one other thing, and I will find this remarkable till the day I die. Karen, when she first contacted me in her email, she said, I don't want to be the next Susan Skip. So who's Susan Skip? Susan Skip was Sonny's was the main story featured in Keith's book. Susan was next in terms of the amount of space that was dedicated to it. And Susan's case is about 10 years old. And Susan was accused of parental alienation. Karen was accused of parental alienation. Susan lost all access to her kids. Karen lost all access to her kids. So she explained it. I interviewed her for my podcast, which you can find, and that one's free. She explained it in more detail, but basically, she looked at Susan's case and is like, oh my God, this is happening to me. But the point I want to make is that's how much that corruption's been exposed, to the point that somebody new comes along and there's so much data, if you will, in Connecticut, that is, that they're like, oh my God, this case right here, that's really notorious, that's 10 years old, that's like me. So I think in a sense it's bad, obviously, because that means a lot of this stuff has happened, but it's good because it's been brought to the surface so much that people have this frame of reference. Now, it's also bad. It's bad, but I think there is something encouraging. I interviewed Frank Carlotto, and actually Frank told me, he did Nexim, that I don't know if that made him, but that's his biggest break.
The big story.
Right, that's a huge story. But Karen came along, and that was his entree into family court. Now he does a lot, and it's frankreport.com if you want to check out his website. And I've written one thing for him as we're taping it. Hopefully we'll do a few things here and there. Hopefully it'll be semi-regular to regular with him. But so he was doing some things on Connecticut. Wayne Dolcefino, who's a very big deal, and Wayne is out of Texas. So he primarily does in Texas, a little bit outside of Texas now, but and then now me. So you have three different journalists with some gravitas, if you will, at roughly the same time attacking this. But on the flip side, none of those journalists are in the Connecticut market. If you're not a person in the media, you really have to understand, I can do a lot. Wayne can do more because in Texas, because his audience is primarily from Texas. Frank can do a lot, but ultimately it's really hard to break this without the local media buying in. And if you don't believe me, Megan Fox and I did a lot of work in St. Louis, and it got a little bit of coverage in St. Louis, but eventually it blew over because Megan Fox at PJ Media, it's national, global, and so they do have an audience in St. Louis, but it's not centered in St. Louis. So yeah, a few people from St. Louis find out about it, but mostly it's the national audience. I have a national audience. Yeah, I'm sure there are people from St. Louis who read my stuff, but it's not primarily there. Without having the local TV station, without having the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, that's their big newspaper, doing it, the people who you interact with. So Elaine Podlowski, that's there. I'll mention her name multiple times and then send her this so she knows I still love her. Without the people who she works with, who are her potential clients, without them knowing about it, it's hard to break it. It's okay if you know about it and you now live in St. Louis, or near there. It's okay if somebody from Texas knows about it. It doesn't hurt you, but it doesn't damage her. It damages her a little, but it doesn't damage her a lot unless it hits in that market. The KMOV, I think that's their big station. I know it's a big station over there. They did one thing. That was a big deal because now you got like 20,000 people in the St. Louis area who know about it. And you can't buy into it. If you read Key's book, he goes into reasons why the Connecticut media doesn't. If you talk to Wayne Dolcefino, he'll tell you, I've talked to him, let me tell you why. Because all of these TV stations, all of these newspapers have lawyers. And as he said multiple times, the lawyers will never let this story go through. They will tell you that the risk of a lawsuit is too high, so we won't do it. Now, I've done these stories for well over a decade. I've been sued twice by the same person. That's it. So is the risk really that high? It sucks. It's not the worst thing ever, but it's not great to be sued.
But even if it's not legal, where people are taking you to court, you meet a lot of resistance when you're talking about this stuff. There's a lot of people that don't want you to,
But the reason that a local TV station, a local newspaper will not run the story is because the lawyers that they have on their payroll won't allow it.
Unreal.
So that's I asked Wayne, I was like, how often did you do this? Never. I was like, why? Because I knew when Wayne's not afraid of it. He does it all the time now. Now, Wayne has a whole unique media firm where you come to him and you pay him to investigate something. So he doesn't have a lawyer telling him no, because he works for himself. And that was the reason he did it this way. Because he was like, I'm done trying to convince some idiot lawyer that this is a good story. I'm just going to work on my own. Now, Wayne's the recipient of 30 local Emmys, so, he can. It's not easy for most journalists to do this. But that's the reason why in Connecticut and St. Louis, and so that creates a dynamic that if in the traditional local market, because like alternative media, there is some, but it's pretty rare to have alternative media that focuses on a specific local area. There is some, but even that, if that happens and it grows big enough, they're going to have lawyers. The lawyers just never let it go through. Now, they're paid to be, careful, whatever the word is. They're paid to make sure that we don't want a lawsuit because there's no story in their mind that's worth a lawsuit. And Wayne feels differently. Now, Wayne has been able to do some damage to the family court system in the area because he's near Houston, because he has a pretty big audience and it's near Houston. So when he runs a story, it is like 20,000 people in the Houston area watching it. So these corrupt lawyers, corrupt judges, and corrupt guardian ad litem and all that other stuff. So he's run stories where after he's pointed out how often lawyers give money to judges that they go in front of, that in the next 6 months, those, and when I say money, I mean campaign donations. Those campaign donations drop by like 90% when he's spotlighted a corrupt guardian ad litem or other. Yeah.
Wow.
Because that local market sees it, the lawyers are caught, and now all of a sudden they don't want to write that check anymore because they don't want to be on Wayne's video anymore. But as I said, we have Wayne Dolcefino. He did two. He did one. But by the way, I've covered Karen's case. Frank's done it like 30 posts. Wayne's done two. And it's still not enough. Ambrose is going to get custody of those kids. Everyone's been exposed. And there's some people in Connecticut that know. And by the way, Connecticut, the Boston Globe covers Connecticut, Boston Herald. So this isn't just newspapers in Connecticut, and none of them will touch this. Not yet. I think we've got a little time for this, but I do think that the media landscape, if you will, is changing. And I think we talked about this last time. Big tech and little tech and medium tech all around, they are the key to all of this. You know, I know you got banned by YouTube, and that was wrong, and that was stupid. But do you understand how great YouTube is in a sense?
Oh, great.
Yeah, you with $0 to $20 can create a video that goes online, and now you can compete with somebody with CNN. You know, I follow Glenn Greenwald, who is controversial, but he broke Edward Snowden, but he does a lot of stuff, and he'll always compare the viewership of, say, CNN, and he'll go, they have as many viewers as a mid-sized YouTube channel. And that's the power of a YouTube. And, you know, look, if you don't like YouTube, you can move to Rumble. It's what I call democratizes it. You know, Joe Rogan is the best example of this. I don't know what it costs him to do his podcast, but I don't think it's very much. And he has as much sway as CNN, sometimes more, just because he's entertaining, he's more interesting, he brings on interesting guests, he does it in a different way. But it costs him almost nothing to do it. You know, he's got his buddy in there, a few people taping him. I'm sure it costs something.
But now he gets paid for it, you know, so even if he does have costs, they're being covered.
What I'm saying is he, without spending a lot of money, now competes against the regular media. And so I think that technology is going to drive it, so the dynamic's different.
Yeah.
So I think we're either at the beginning of the revolution or maybe in the middle, not at the end, but it's changing. So the fact that, and I said this to Frank, the fact that at roughly the same time, me, you, and Wayne Dolcefino are all looking at the Connecticut family court system, that says a lot. Because 5 years ago, if you could get one, you know, when I first started this, I was like, who's writing about it? And everybody said Keith Harmon Snow, which was great for Keith. But if everyone knows one guy, because there's only one guy, that's a huge problem. Now we have 3 different people all looking at one somewhat random state. And before I forget,
men, which is really powerful too.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing I should note, there's a Connecticut politician, a Democrat named Minnie Gonzalez, who has driven this. She's no longer on the Judiciary Committee because they kicked her off because she was too much of a problem for them. But she challenges all the judges. She brings forward a lot of these cases. She's one of the main reasons why there's a lot of knowledge about what's happening in Connecticut. The problem is she's one vote. It doesn't matter. She's convinced a few other politicians, but really most of them are in bed with the system, so they don't want to take it on. But when you say there's no politicians brave enough, that's not correct. Look up Minnie Gonzalez. She's definitely brave enough. I actually, I've written about her a few times. You can find one in a Hispanic newspaper called Al Dia, which did pretty well. And so I do think that the media landscape is changing. And I think in a year or two, who knows? Technology constantly gets better. which makes it easier for everyone to come along and to do their own podcast, to do their own version of media. Substack will, I think, contribute to that in its own way. All of this stuff is contributing to changing the way the media works. And so I think the power of the local media in a local market is going to be reduced. So where the alternative media can break the story where it actually has an effect, but not yet. But at the same time, the fact that you have three people at the same time looking at a state like Connecticut, which is rather small, suggests that a lot of progress media-wise has been made. So I don't remember if I said this, but if I didn't, I should have. If you've been victimized by it, and people like to say, if you've survived it, they used to complain, no one covers this. No, people cover it, not enough, but you can't really say no one covers it anymore. You have three different journalists at the same time covering the state of Connecticut. That's not a big state. It's a kind of a random state.
Yeah.
And maybe a Wayne Dolcefino will lead the way in creating a new business model, if you will. You ask me how, and I basically do it somewhat similarly to Wayne, but if you ask Wayne, well, how do you pick your story? Well, if you pay me, I will investigate it. So pay me and then I'll investigate it. That's how I pick my stories. I have a business that I run. And so maybe journalists, as they get sick and tired of dealing with lawyers, will go off on their own and you'll just come to them directly. And that'll be one of the ways that the media will change. And we'll see. It definitely will change. I'm not going to try to predict the future because no one does, but I think it's changing. I think that the technology will play a big role. Social media, by the way, plays a huge role. This is where victims find each other. It's where they find journalists. It's where they spread these stories. You can hate Mark Zuckerberg all you like, all of the people on Twitter, but the fact is, without those two places, far less people would know about this stuff, because where would you tell other people about it without social media? So you can still hate Mark, but and Twitter and all of these. And if you've been banned, you can still hate him. But where else, 20 years ago, if you knew about that, where would you tell people? By email, call? That's a lot. That doesn't spread nearly as quickly as putting it on Facebook and letting people share and all this other stuff. So getting back to the original theme, there is a racketeering in the courts. We are exposing it. The dynamic in the media is not quite there yet for the exposure to totally happen, but I think it's changing, and it's only a matter of time. And I think this is a good thing and a bad thing. The corrupt people, they're so arrogant, they don't really care. But I think that's what's going to bring them down. They're willing to continue to do things and not change and not recognize that things are changing. And those are the kinds of people that get brought down. So it's only a matter of time. Look, people are waking up to it. One thing is, when people hear a story like this, if they've never heard it, they're just the average person on the street, they're rarely bored. I don't think that you could hear about a story like this and go, that doesn't sound very interesting. So I think there is a market for it, if you will, and it has to find its place. And I think it is. But the media landscape is changing and it's not quite there yet. So look, if you're in the middle of this, I can't promise that you'll be saved. But I think it's only a matter of time before it breaks. And as Frank told me, for many months, I was talking about this cult that was branding people and nobody cared. And then one day the New York Times wrote about it and they mentioned me, and then somebody else and somebody else. So it'll happen. And the New York Times, the Washington Post has written about this. Not a lot, but they have. There's a very famous Washington Post article, I think it's from 2018, very famous for people who have been victimized, where they spotlighted reunification camps and other camps like it, and it did very well in terms of traffic, and it's still shared from time to time. The New York Times has done stuff. Most of the media has touched it. The problem is, like, you do a story or two and then it goes away. That's not going to have much of an impact. That's what happened in St. Louis. You had a story here, you had a story there. people, with all of the news that goes around, you quickly forget about it. It has to be sustained. And the reality was they didn't want to do it because they were going to get sued. But what you said as well, and it's true, these are tough stories, and a lot of times the media just doesn't want to take them on. But you don't want to minimize the effect of the threat of the lawsuit. And so the main difference between this story and a political story is and I, even though I'm not a lawyer, I can speak about this as an expert because I was sued. So I learned about this part of the law really well. Is in these stories, you're talking about what the law refers to as private citizens. With politicians, they are public figures. Somebody like Donald Trump you can say almost anything you want about Trump and Nancy Pelosi if you don't want to be partisan. And you could get sued. You can always get sued, but you're going to win unless it's so egregious, it's just over the top egregious. Because now, if you say the same thing about what the court deems a private individual, it's much easier to lose. And so that's the main difference. And so that's why the lawyers stop these stories from going through. And look, the other thing is, on the flip side, a story about Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump is likely to get a lot more traffic than a story about someone you've never heard of. And so that's another thing. Look, that's what Frank Parlato was dealing with for a long time too. Who cares? I don't know about this cult. Who are these people? There's nobody famous in this. Why should I care? Well, now everybody seems to care. And you know what? He didn't stop. So you don't stop. And at some point, this gets picked up. Now, the other thing is, and I think we'll wrap up after this, there's been some celebrities that have been involved. Britney Spears, as far as guardianship, she has an opportunity. I don't know if she'll take it. She can absolutely use her celebrity on her own, if she wants to completely blow up guardianship, to use her case as an entree to this world, if she wants to, and she may. And she's hinted at it. That doesn't mean she'll do it. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. Angelina Jolie helped pass a law. She's definitely, Angelina, that is, committed to trying to bring publicity to this thing. I'm not certain that she understands it in a way where she can explain it to people so they understand, but we'll see. But she is going to use her celebrity, and that's key. She attracts a lot more attention than the average person. So that will help. There was a guy named Greg Ellis, who's a much less famous actor, who's written a book, who's done a lot. So there are celebrities. Alec Baldwin wrote a book about it. He went through it. He didn't mention her by name, but it was in his divorce with Kim Basinger. He wrote a book about it. So there have been celebrities that go through it. They could help a lot, and some of them have. So I still believe the system is ripe to fall, and the media is changing. And as I said, the racketeers aren't, and I think that's one reason why they will get exposed. And look, they're being exposed as we speak. And a lot of times people think that because you don't see a sea change that nothing's happening, but things are happening. And so I'm hopeful. You keep going. And I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't think it's going to, I think it'll happen in my lifetime, and hopefully a lot sooner than just in my lifetime. But all of the pieces are there to have the system completely fall apart. And so I'll leave it on that hopeful note.
And I love that you are hopeful, because I think for a lot of parents, it's hard to be hopeful. So for somebody like you, who's seen case after case after case for a decade now, to be able to a decade later say, I have hope after seeing all of this, that's really inspiring for people to hear. Now,
and I'm not a glasses half full always kind of guy. So I'm not saying it just because I want to be hopeful.
But you're the one that's like seeing, you can see analytics of like people who care and more people covering it.
Right. I'm hopeful because when I started, there was nothing. And now I'm one of 3 journalists who's looking at the state of Connecticut that suggests, I won't mention a politician by name yet because he backed out, but I had a politician from Missouri contact me because they had been contacted by a lot of men, is what the person told me. And I scheduled them for a podcast, and then they chickened out. And hopefully they won't chicken out, and I'll do the podcast later. But that shows how far it came. So number one, a lot of people contacted the politician. Number two, the politician listened. Number three, the politician looked around and he found media. So that a lot of pieces put together. One thing, you should always contact your, if this is happening to you, call on the local, state, national level. If you do nothing else, you put it on people's radar. And these politicians need to hear from you. They have the power to stop it. They're not using their power. Don't let them think, they can tell you they have no power. It's funny, they have no power unless it's something they want to stop or make happen. Then they have all the power in the world. But you have to put it on people's radars, and then go to your local county boards, especially on the county level. The county controls a lot of the money, specifically like CPS. If you want to stop CPS, go to your local county board and talk about how corrupt CPS is. And then you say something like, and I've done this at county boards, don't give them another dime until they explain what I've asked for. Say, they may not do it, but you have to ask them. I've talked to not a lot of politicians, but a few, and they're all aware of this stuff, which suggests that parents have been going to them. So that's why I'm hopeful, because of what I see, not just because I'm not really even a hopeful person. I'm hopeful because of what I've seen.
But it still gives people hope to see that, you know, and I love that about you, that, you know, you're not so discouraged that you think that this is just impossible.
I'm the opposite of it.
Yeah.
Really, I'm the opposite of it. I look at technology and I look at the media and I think it's changing. And I look at it used to be, even like say 2018. Let's say 2018, every time there was a family court story, it was an event for people. Oh my God, you hear about it? Now there's like 4 every day. Now it's hard to get traffic because everybody's got something going on. Now it's, oh my God, you know, another kid died, or another scandal here, another scandal there. And look, that's another thing. Certainly as far as CPS is concerned, the local media is covering it. Maybe you think not enough. I know the USA Today did a big thing in Florida. The Chicago Sun-Times has done a lot in Illinois. The Boston Globe has done a lot of stuff in Massachusetts. I did an article about how many kids are molested in foster care. Well, you know, how did I know about a lot of kids being molested in foster care? Because I keep finding articles about it. So I don't think more kids are being molested than 10 years ago. I think there's more articles being done. So that's what gives me hope. People are waking up. And another thing is, laws are constantly being proposed. Some are passing. I don't think most of them are that good, but there's an evolution to this. First, you need to get the politicians to care. Then you need to get the politicians to act. Then you have to get them to act properly. You've gotten them to care, you've gotten them to act. Now they just got to act properly. We're close. We're close. It's an evolution.
I love that. Now for parents who, you gave a couple tips, but if you were a parent, for example, going through this, or if you were to meet a parent that came to you first and said, hey, I've read your stories, I don't want to repeat bad decisions or maybe wrong decisions, what are some other tips that you'd give to parents listening who might be going through this, and they haven't done anything yet?
If you're in a corrupt case, try to find media. That's really hard. Get the best lawyer you can afford. Try and settle. Be wary of anyone who thinks the solution is the appointment of anyone. If you're talking to your lawyer and they say blah blah blah, and that's why we need a guardian ad litem, you don't want to trust that lawyer. You never need these court professionals ever. But unfortunately, there is no magic bullet. There's no secret affidavit. If someone's telling you about a secret affidavit, they're probably screwing you over. Get the best lawyer you can afford. Get media attention if you can. Do not go for the appointment of anyone, because they are there to corrupt the case, to confuse the case, to complicate the case, and that's it. And try and settle. Do this without going to court if you can. If you can. And those are there's no secret formula that I have. Can't believe how often I get stuff like this. I once had a woman ask me what she should file in federal court. I think it was Maryland. to get her kids back. He's like, why would you think I would know what you would file in federal court in Maryland? There's no secret motion. There's no secret anything. You find the best lawyer that you can afford. You take their advice, unless their advice is the appointment of anyone, because that's bad advice. And be wary of anyone who uses the term high conflict. That's a scam term. All divorces are high conflict. That's why you're getting divorced. All right. Don't let anyone make you think that you're high conflict, like your conflict is worse than the regular, because that's what they use to bring in the appointees. You know, we're high conflict. You're all high conflict. That's why you're getting divorced, of course. It's just this term that they create to make an excuse to bring people in. So that's what I would say. If you can afford a good lawyer, get a good lawyer. If you can get media attention, get media attention. Be wary of anybody who tries to get people appointed. And that's it. And settle if you can. And look, for the most part, you can. The stories you hear, it's hard with certain people, but with most people, you can settle. Try and settle. Don't bring it into court. The extra that you're going to try to squeeze out will be eaten up by court costs anyway. The extra time with your kids, the extra 401k, the extra home that you're trying to get, it's going to get eaten up by the court anyway, by the fees you pay. So try and settle. And that's it.
Now, if people want to hire you, if they want to find you, get in touch with you, support you, where are you at?
It's michaelvolpe.substack.com. And then after that .com, there's a /subscribe. If you want me to look at your story, it's the founders membership. It's not the free one. A bunch of people try to do that to me. They're like, oh no, I signed up. I was like, no, not the free one. I don't care about the free one. And look, I get, you know, I had a guy over the weekend, I don't remember if it was this weekend, one of these weekends, who it was some sort of prison related story. And he tried to sell me on doing it for free. And it was not quite 7 a.m. on a Saturday. And I was like, you know what? It's 6:50 in the morning on a Saturday. How many of these do you think I'm going to get? Do you really think I need to do yours? And look, I'm trying to create a business model. That's why I charge. So, so get the founders membership, and you can get the free one. That gives you access to all of my free articles, which is about half of them, and then you can pay for the paywall as well. And that's how you find me, michaelvolpe.substack.com.
And where are you at on social media?
It's at Mike Volpe. I don't remember what the Facebook page one is, but at Mike Volpe on Twitter. With my, it's in a suit. I was picking out suits for a wedding when I took that photo. It's not that old. That's like 4 years old, that photo. So, and I think that's it.
Well, I'll link it all below. The work that you're doing is so incredible. And I encourage everybody to go resource Mike. It's not easy when you're in, or I should say outside of the MSM model, to make a living off doing all of this. And especially whenever you're going against a lot of the narratives that they're not allowed to talk about. And to be able to resource Mike, it gives him the opportunity to continue doing this good work for people, and to continue doing and covering these stories and helping these families, you know. And that's what I wish for all survivors, for all parents, you know, the Samantha Baldwins who are taking the time to do podcasts, and all the different survivors out there looking to monetize off their story and the different things that they've been through. That way they can continue to bring light to it. You know, we can't do this without your guys' support. So go support Mike. Thank you guys so much for supporting our show. You guys can find all of our links below too in my direct me. Just click there, and all your support means the world to what we do also. We can't do this without you guys. So we will see you guys next week. Thank you for tuning in, and God bless all of you.